Hi everybody, welcome back to the Soma Yoga series of videos looking at the anatomy and physiology of yoga poses. So the first series of videos that we're going to produce are going to be focused on standing poses, and today's video specifically is going to look at Vīrābhadrāsana 1, Warrior 1, and Vīrābhadrāsana 2, Warrior 2 pose. So we're going to begin with Warrior 1. So Warrior, this is with an A. It's a strong pose, not Warrior, like, oh my God, what's going on, And it's a very important pose because as well as being a pose that we tend to do in isolation, it's also one of the key poses in the Surya Namaskar B, the Sun Salutation B series. So very important that we get this pose nailed down and understand the mechanics of the pose, So I'm going to ask Gabby to come into a Warrior 1 pose. And then we're going to examine different aspects of the pose. So this is the Vīrābhadrāsana 1, Warrior 1 pose. And I'm going to just take you through different parts of the body and to give Gabby a rest while I'm talking about the lower part of the body where she doesn't need to keep her arms up. So if we look at the front leg is obviously bent. It's quite a lot of work on the quadriceps muscles, these 4 muscles on the top of the leg. So we're working the quadricep muscle. And despite the fact that the glutes and the hamstrings are slightly being pulled as we sink down, they're still active. So we've got this isometric static hold on the front leg. Coming down to the lower leg as well, the foot's planted firmly down. So we're working, again, various muscles in the lower leg, the peroneus muscles on the outside of the lower leg, stopping the foot curling in. And notice how the knee is directly above the ankle here. So we'll come back to that later on when we talk about modifications and problems in the pose sometimes. So that's basically the front leg. So coming round to the back leg, you'll see the back foot typically will have the heel to heel alignment, so the front heel and the back heel will align. And I'll probably turn that foot in a little bit more. So we have the back foot in at about 45-degree angle with the back leg really strong and straight. So we're having to work these quadricep muscles in the back leg to extend the knee, pressing down on the big toe mound and the outside of the heel as well. So keeping that really firm. And then we're in extension, obviously, of the hip here. So the muscles that work particularly here, your gluteus maximus, which is your big muscle on the backside, this is working to extend the hip. It also tends to externally rotate the hip as well. So we need to engage a little bit the front of the gluteus medius muscle, gluteus minimum muscle, and the tensor fasciae latae muscle. These are internal rotators that counteract the external rotation coming from the gluteus maximus, that big muscle in your butt. And then obviously these internal rotators on the outside, the gluteus medius anterior, the front part of the gluteus medius, the TFL, and even the adductor muscles on the inside of the leg. They're all helping to rotate the leg in to counteract that big muscle at the back, the gluteus maximus. And then if we look here on the front, we'll see that the iliopsoas muscles, the hip flexor muscles, which are flexing on the front leg, but they're being stretched here on the back leg. So we're seeing a stretch of the iliopsoas muscle. We're also seeing a stretch into the rectus femoris muscle, which is one of the 4 quadricep muscles. It's the only quadricep muscle that actually runs both over the hip and over the knee. The other 3 quadricep muscles only run over the knee. So that's a very long muscle, and it's also being stretched in this position here. Now, if we turn to the trunk now, the trunk, we want a nice tall vertical trunk, so the muscles in the back, the erector spinae muscles, as well as the quadratus lumborum muscles, these lower muscles down here, they have to work, they have to contract a little in order to keep the spine nice and tall and upright. Yeah? And then let's take the arms all the way up, Gabby. That's it. Now in the full pose, the hands are together. Yeah? We'll come to modifications later. But here, we want to drop the shoulders away from the ears, so I'm creating a bit of space. So the lower trapezius muscles are working to pull the shoulders down, and with the triceps, the back of the arms, they're extending the arms straight, and at the same time, they're helping with this external rotation of the upper arm. And that's important because the external rotation of the upper arm creates more space in the shoulder girdle so that we're not going to get that impingement sometimes that people can get of the acromion process and the top of the humerus bone, which causes sometimes problems inside the joint, bursitis, tendinopathy, and so on. Now, that's the full pose there. Just relax for a second. You can come back up, straighten the front leg, and just take a rest for a moment. Give Gabby a little rest. It's quite hard work, isn't it, staying in Warrior One for a long time? It is a very strong pose. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the key things, modifications, and also things that you'll often hear teachers say, which I'm going to maybe question today. So the first thing, I remember when I started yoga in Warrior One, I would often hear the cue from a teacher, square your hips. Yeah, square your hips. Now, if you look at the angle of the back foot, Gabby's back foot is at a 45-degree angle. Yeah. Ultimately, her chest is going to be facing forward towards the front of the mat. If you try and jam the front hip forward, yeah, which some people have the flexibility to do, it tends to squeeze and pinch in the lower back. So we want to work to have 45-degree angle in the back foot, slightly more turned in at the hip, but not too much, like a corkscrew, and then completely turned forward in the chest. So it's the chest, not the hip, that's supposed to be pointing forward. And it's anatomically unsound to try and have the hips level and pointing straight forward when your back foot with the heel is down at a 45-degree angle. Yeah? So that's something to think of, that corkscrew effect, working gradually round from foot to hip to chest. Yeah? Now let's take the arms up, if you would, Gabby. Yeah. Now in the full pose, Gabby's looking up and her hands are together, shoulders relaxing down away from the ears. Here. Now again, for some people, it's going to be impossible to get the hands together. They may have a very rounded upper back, what's called kyphosis, kyphotic rounded upper back, which is going to make their arms come forward like that. Equally as well, you can bring the hands down for a moment, the muscle here that runs from the coracoid process down into the ribs, the pectoralis minor muscle, is very tight on some people. And if it's very tight, it tends to, people who you tend to see with shoulders pulled forward a little bit, again, it's going to be very hard for them to stretch the arms up and vertical, yeah? So we can take the hands a little wider, is going to make it easier. So with the hands shoulder width apart, it takes some of that pressure out of the pectoralis minor. It also puts less pressure or less stretch into the latissimus dorsi as well. So that's an easier modification. The other thing that we sometimes see on the legs, you can bring the hands back down again. I'm going to put a block here, and Gabby's going to bend her front leg. And we can see that the knee is staying directly over the ankle. But for some people, there's a tendency for the knee to drop in. So if you place a block there, if the knee drops in, you can see how the block is tipping towards the floor. So you can even put 2 blocks if you need to, yeah? So you can have it even higher. But just with 1 block, you can see as she comes in. So sometimes tightness in the groin can be a factor in pulling the knee in. But when we do that, we're putting extra pressure onto the medial ligament, and it would be advisable to focus on keeping your knee directly above the ankle in a Warrior One. And now we're going to take a look at Vīrābhadrāsana 2, Warrior 2. It's also in the same family, but with a slightly different position of the hips due to the change in the back leg, position of the back leg. So Gabby, if you'd like to step into a Warrior 2 position. Yeah. So in the Warrior 2 position, you'll notice the front leg is basically in the same position as it was in Warrior 1. The thing that's changed here is the back leg, and the back leg here, the foot has turned out to a 90-degree rather than a 45-degree angle. Yeah, and that has opened the hips more in the Warrior 2. So whereas before, in the front leg, it's the same really. The quadriceps are still working hard, very active, and they're going to get tired if you stay in this position for quite a while, as Gabby can attest to. Yeah, we're also working the muscles in the lower leg as well, so engaging some of the muscles, keeping the foot firmly planted, on both sides of the foot. The knee staying over the ankle, we'll come back to that later on in this video. Now let's turn to the back leg here, yeah? So we want a strong back leg, yeah? Really strong back leg. So we've got to fire up these quadricep muscles to keep the knee extended, yeah? So the main difference now from what the Warrior 1 was, in Warrior 2, the adductor muscles on the insides of the legs, yeah, those muscles here are stretched more. Whereas if you remember, in Warrior 1, it was the hip flexors running down the front that were getting more of a stretch. So here, the stretch has moved towards the adductor muscles. And again, there's more external rotation here. So we're not utilizing the front of the gluteus medius and the TFL to try and internally rotate that back leg in this pose, yeah? So we're allowing the gluteus maximus, that big muscle in the butt, we're allowing that to extend the hip back and rotate, yeah? So then if we turn to the trunk, it's very much the same as we had before. In the trunk here, we're working the muscles along the back to keep the body upright, so the erector spinae muscles that run all the way up the back, the quadratus lumborum muscles as well act as a back extensor, so we're keeping the back up, yeah? And then you'll notice here, the arms are extending outwards, yeah? So whereas with Warrior 1, we had the arms overhead, stretching up, here they're extending out. And we're using here the muscles in the shoulders. So there's 2 muscles. As we bring the arm down, as it starts to lift up, we start to use the supraspinatus muscle, which is a small muscle, rotator cuff. As it continues then to lift up further to here, the mid-deltoid starts to come in as well, and we're using the mid-deltoid to hold that arm up. Same with the back arm as well. And we're stretching back, stretching forward, opening up. And then to keep the chest nice and open, again with the shoulders engaged, those lower traps, again pulling the shoulders down, keeping them away from the ears. So we can also work this pectoralis minor muscle. So we're lifting the chest, because once we've engaged the shoulders and the shoulders are fixed, by engaging then the pectoralis minor, it's going to lift the chest and open the chest. And you'll notice Gabby is looking towards her index finger in the front hand, yeah? So you can just relax the arms, maybe relax the leg a little bit, come up a bit. Just take a moment. It's quite hard work holding this pose for a long time. Yeah. So let's look again at some of the things, the modifications and so on for some people. So you'll notice when Gabby went down into her Deep Warrior 2, yeah, with that back leg straight, really strong, and the front knee pushing right forward, yeah. In that position there, for a lot of people, what's going to happen? The front knee is going to come inwards. The back knee is going to bend a little bit, yeah. And it's because of tightness in the adductors in particular. So the muscles that run on the inside of the leg. So we have a number of muscles there. The adductor magnus, we have the adductor brevis, adductor longus, gracilis, pectineus. There's lots of different little muscles there, or some of them not that little, actually quite large. And they can be quite tight. So if you're finding that you're really struggling, you're trying to straighten your leg, but your knee just won't go out like this, then shortening your stance, just making the stance shorter, coming up a little higher, takes the stretch out of here. So it's easier, isn't it? Yeah? Much easier. So you just shorten the stance and your body comes up a little higher. That takes this stretch out of the adductor muscles on the inside of the groin and enables you then to still be able to hold the pose without the knee buckling in and without the back leg bending like that. Yeah, so we want it strong, still strong, just a shorter strong one. Now, the other thing we tend to find sometimes is people overarch their back and stick their butt out. Yeah, so here the ribs are sticking out. So we want to scoop the butt down, pull the belly in. So we're thinking about, I want to get these ribs, I want to pull them in, draw them in. So we're working the rectus abdominis, the muscles at the front of our belly are actually pulling in to stop the chest arching backwards. So whilst we're still keeping extension in the back, we're working here to pull, and we're also drawing the belly slightly back, so those deep muscles, the transversus abdominis muscles, which are the ones that run horizontally and draw the belly in, pulling in, they're also helping support. Yeah. Then let's look at the arms. So again, another thing you tend to find with beginners is that the lean forward, the lean forward look, and it's generally, this is not to do with flexibility, it's more typically body awareness. So just the teacher giving a cue to draw the body vertical. Think of the body as a vertical stick standing upright. Yeah, so that's one of the problems that people sometimes encounter in this pose, the leaning forward. The other thing that tends to happen because they're not looking at the back arm is the back arm tends to droop down. Again, it's not flexibility, it's just awareness. So again, if you're a teacher, you just remind them, lift that back arm up, the back arm extending backwards as much as the front arm is extending forwards. One other area which we often encounter is if someone's very tight in their chest, so the pectoralis major muscles or the pectoralis minor muscles are tight, it's pulling their arms in and they're trying to get the arms out but they can't because it's being pulled in. So if that's you, then on that one it is a flexibility issue and we've got to work on stretching and opening up the pectoralis muscles prior to doing the pose. And again, for anybody who's looking to learn preparatory practices for these poses, then you're welcome to either put a comment into the YouTube video, contact me directly, and I can talk to you about what you can do to work on these different issues maybe to improve the optimization of the yoga pose. Yeah. And the last thing, if we come back into the pose, as I mentioned, Gabby's face, her eyes are looking towards the index finger. Now for some people that turning of the neck is going to be hard. So if you're one of those people, then guess what? Don't turn the head so much. That's it. You can face this way. You can maybe partially turn the head. Yeah, and if you are able to turn it the whole way, then you can turn it all the way forward. Yeah, so it's not super important that your eyes are pointing towards the index finger, but that ultimately is the final position, the ultimate expression of the pose. So in this video, we've looked at Vīrābhadrāsana 1, Vīrābhadrāsana 2, we've looked at some of the modifications that we can do, we've looked at the differences between the two poses, and we're going to continue with standing poses in the next video, and I hope that you'll come and join me and Gabby for the next series. Thank you very much.